Indulge me for a moment in a thought experiment. What if Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's husband was discovered to have been working with a major Democratic donor on the funding of left-wing political activism for several years? Say with, I don't know, right-wing villain and multi-billionaire George Soros? What would Fox do? What would the Republican Party do? They'd lose their mind. You would already have impeachment articles drawn up in the House against Justice Jackson, even though George Soros, contrary to what Republicans would like you to think, has actually done nothing wrong. Well, that is the subject of Politico's new reporting involving Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, his wife Ginny, and the multimillionaire conservative judicial activist and lobbyist Leonard Leo. This comes on the back of the myriad Thomas scandals in recent memory, like when he failed to recuse himself from 2020 election-related cases, even though his wife Ginny Thomas has been accused of helping push the coup attempt in 2020. Then there was the ProPublica reporting this year, revealing how Thomas failed to disclose multiple trips on billionaire benefactor Harlan Crow's 162-foot yacht, flights on his private jet, and weeks at his private resort. Or the fact that Crow paid for his mother's house, where she still lives rent-free, or that he paid for his grandnephew's school tuition, who Thomas raised as his own son. That reporting forced him to amend his financial disclosure last month. And now a new Politico investigation is adding to that list, reporting that Ginny Thomas's web of ties to Leonard Leo is far deeper and more financially entangled than previously known. Heidi Przybyla, excuse me, my pronunciation is always bad, is a national investigative correspondent at Politico and is the author of that new report titled What Ginny Thomas and Leonard Leo Wrought, How a Justice's Wife and a Key Activist Started a Movement. And she joins me now. Heidi, this is an incredible deep dive from you. The chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee issued a statement on your piece today and said, we're living with the consequences of dark money's influence on the Supreme Court every day. What was the most striking thing you uncovered in your reporting?
Well, there were a few striking things, Mehdi. Look, we've long known that Leonard Leo is the face of dark money behind the conservative Supreme Court movement. But what we found was that the collaboration between him and the wife of a Supreme Court Justice, Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny, actually began just weeks before his decision in that Citizens United ruling, which would, of course, benefit those very groups. What we found also was that when that blew up, which was pretty quickly, Mehdi, when people found out that she is going to have her own dark money group, there was a lot of backlash to that. And this is the big reveal in the story, is that there was a plan B. And that plan B was activated almost immediately. They pivoted to another dark money group and started paying her under the table. Part of that was, we know, through Kellyanne Conway. But the big question here, Mehdi, based on all of the documentation that I had 5 IRS experts look at, is did he ever stop paying her? What did he pay her for? Did this go on for years? Because unlike the first plan, Plan A, which was for them to have their own dark money group together, that blew apart, right? We're not finding out about Plan B, which is this under-the-table arrangement where he was paying her via another dark money group and just having it billed with no mention of Ginny, of course, whether that ever ended. And if you look at the arc of all of this, a lot of the people in Thomas's orbit, for instance, former law clerks, were kind of brought into this. It is his former law clerk, Carrie Severino, who for a time became one of the highest paid directors at this group, which is a non-profit group. That's a whole separate can of potential worms there, Mehdi, which I can get into in a minute. But it stands that we don't know what kind of work she did for this charitable group. It's supposed to be a charitable group. It's tax exempt, and whether the payments ever stop. Piece 2 is about nonprofit tax law, and I do not want to bore you all with this, but it is something that's super important because it's the subject of a D.C. Attorney General, Attorney General investigation right now, is the potential abuse of nonprofit tax laws by Leo's network of dark money groups.
I'm sure all these non-profits were totally neutral in accordance with charity law. Of course they were. Heidi, you report that a person familiar with Ginny Thomas's thinking around 2010, before the Citizens United ruling, said, quote, Ginny really wanted to build an organization and be a movement leader. Leonard, Leo, was going to be the conduit of that. Do we have an idea of how much money Leo has directed to Ginny Thomas, or the timeline of when the payments began?
The timeline of when the payments began, I might be able to be more helpful on. The full amount of the money. I made several passes at them on and asked both representatives for Thomas as well as Leonard Leo's group and got no answers on that. But the timeline is extremely interesting, and I encourage everybody to click inside the story because we worked hard to kind of distill that for you. However, it shows that to the month that the nonprofit experiment between Leonard and Ginny blew up, by the way, because of a phone call that she made to Anita Hill, which drew unwanted attention to her. But
yes,
when that blew up, they pivoted immediately. I mean, like within days, Ginny Thomas filed paperwork to create her own for-profit group. And this group, the Judicial Education Project, which was used subsequently to pay her, was retroactively reactivated to a little bit earlier in the year. And the same amount of money, similar amount of money that she had made at her first stab at having her own nonprofit with Leonard was then deposited into the Judicial Education Project. Of course, that is the problem. The actual essence of the problem with dark money is we have no idea what it was used for.
Yes.
There was some IRS reporting discrepancies about how much it actually took in that were flagged to me. I had to do a lot of work going through all of this tedious job of going through all of the IRS paperwork. And thank God for the IRS experts, including the former commissioner, who really helped me distill it.
We are glad you did it. Heidi, you reported recently that Leonard Leo's network of profits, non-profits, profitable groups, is the subject of a Washington, D.C. Attorney General investigation looking at whether Leo enriched himself and his friends. Do you have an update on that investigation at all?
No update, because that was not something I think that the D.C. Attorney General really wanted out there in the first place. They prefer to keep these things quiet, but I did come upon that information, particularly because some of it included my prior reporting, and was able to inform people that there is this investigation ongoing of Leonard Leo and his broader orbit of nonprofits because, Mehdi, within the 2 years after Leonard Leo went to a for-profit from his full-time role at the Federalist Society, $43 million went into his for-profit company. And again, we had trouble getting answers as to what kind of services were rendered for this money. And then secondly, there were just a lot of examples there of individuals setting up side LLCs who were friends of Leonard, including a very good friend who had taken in $7 million to his nonprofit even after its nonprofit status had been auto-revoked by the IRS.
I wish the Senate Democrats were doing as much investigating as you are. Heidi Przybyla, thank you so much for your reporting. Really appreciate it.